my menopausal wonders. I'm back and I'm picking up where I left off in the last tutorial. Watching my videos in order is ultra critical. So here's where we are. Video 138 was entitled, What is Endometriosis? Video 139 was entitled, What's the Effect of Menopause on Endometriosis? And this is video 140 entitled, Can you take HRT if you have endometriosis? I order all these videos to make it as easy as possible for you to understand absolutely everything. And if you watch them in order, I assure you that you will understand everything. So here we are addressing whether or not you can take HRT if you have had or have endometriosis. This is important if you have ever had endometriosis. So if you have had your endometriosis treated, or if you've had a hysterectomy, or if you've had your ovaries removed, you still need to watch this video. I'll tell you from the very beginning, none of these things makes it unnecessary for you to watch this video. Okay. To start, we'll set the stage with a bit of review. Endometriosis is when some of the tissue called endometrium that is supposed to shed and exit your body through your vagina during your periods gets confused and goes the wrong way, and it travels up instead of down. Instead of going downward toward your vagina, it moves upward toward your fallopian tubes, and then it backs all the way up your fallopian tubes to the very end of your fallopian tubes, and then it drips out the end of the tube into your pelvis and lands on something nearby. And it can land on your ovary or your intestines or your bladder or even the outer part of your uterus or on the fallopian tube itself. When it lands, it implants, and it makes the new location its new home. So what you see here are little implants of endometriosis. And it continues to respond to hormones just like it did when it was inside your uterus. Estrogen makes it get thick, and progesterone makes it bleed. Every cycle you've had during your lifetime has been a result of estrogen making your lining thick and progesterone making it bleed. So this is what happens with every cycle, back to the menstrual cycle board. So cycles are the culprit in creating endometriosis, and hormones are what continue to support the endometriosis once it relocates. So as long as you produce estrogen and progesterone, your endometriosis has fuel to continue its pattern of building up and then bleeding. And along with that, of forming adhesions and causing symptoms. But as you know, post-menopause is when you stop producing hormones. So there's no more estrogen to make the endometriosis tissue build up. And there's no more progesterone to make it bleed. So theoretically, you'd expect endometriosis to settle down and stop progressing once you're post-menopausal. But I ended the last tutorial by informing you that that isn't always the case, and it's not necessarily that simple. Unfortunately, anything can happen with your endometriosis once you're post-menopausal. It can settle down, it can remain as is, or it can get worse. But it does not turn into cancer. And of course, if you take HRT, that can make it more likely that it will get worse. But there are all sorts of nuances that you need to understand. So that's what I'll teach you in this video. The reason this is so important is because of the diseases associated with menopause, including heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. I taught you in videos 80 through 90 all about the estrogen window of opportunity. You learned that starting estrogen replacement in the first 5 to 10 years of your postmenopause can decrease your risk or prevent these diseases. And most women consider these diseases much more significant than endometriosis. So what it comes down to for the majority of women is finding a way to be able to get the benefits of HRT without making their endometriosis worse. As I've told you, menopause management is a balancing act. Everything, absolutely everything, has both benefits and risks. Nothing is perfect. Your job is to weigh all the benefits and risks and decide what's best for you. And I'm here to help you do that. So let's look at some different scenarios. I like to use scenarios because they help you get the big picture. I can play out different hypothetical situations in scenarios that help you decide what's most appealing to you. So let's use one side of this scale as the side for endometriosis and the other side as the side for menopause. So this is endometriosis, this is menopause. So you're balancing endometriosis against menopause. For scenario one, let's say that you have had endometriosis and you've never had any treatment for it. So when you reach postmenopause, your endometriosis is still present. And let's say that it settles down once you're not producing any estrogen or progesterone. In that case, you can do one of two things. You can shout hallelujah and pass on taking HRT, or you can take HRT. Let's play each of those out. If you don't take HRT, there's a trade-off. Your endometriosis is better, but you trade your symptoms of endometriosis for the symptoms of menopause. And you'd most likely be increasing your risks for heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. So you would have to find other ways to compensate for the absence of estrogen. If you do take HRT, there are also trade-offs. You may have to deal with continued symptoms of endometriosis. But you would likely be preventing a heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. It's all a matter of weighing these two things and determining which is better for you. Okay, here's scenario two. Let's say you've had a total hysterectomy. And as you know, the term total hysterectomy means that you no longer have your uterus and cervix. Video 132 was all about total hysterectomy. Watch it if you haven't already. So, with total hysterectomy, this is gone. So what does that mean? Well, the source of the endometriosis is this endometrial tissue that comes from inside your uterus. So without your uterus, you cannot develop any new endometriosis. But what about any existing endometriosis? What if, even though your uterus is gone, there are some endometriosis implants in your pelvis? What if you have something like this? Aha, so a little bit different scenario because look, you have endometriosis here. Well, you're right back to where you were in scenario one. If you don't take HRT, there's a trade-off. Your endometriosis is better. But you trade your symptoms of endometriosis for the symptoms of menopause. And you would likely be increasing your risks for heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. So you would have to find other ways to compensate for the absence of estrogen. If you do take HRT, there's also a trade-off. You may have to deal with continued symptoms of endometriosis, but you'd be preventing heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's disease. And once again, all that matters is the weights of these different things on your personal scale. You get to decide these weights. I'm using just weights, but you can use whatever weight you want. For scenario 3, let's say you still have your uterus and your doctor says you can only take HRT if you have a hysterectomy. So now you have to consider the risks of surgery itself against the risks of the diseases associated with menopause. So let's make the right side of the scale the risks of surgery. And let's make the left side of the scale the risks of the diseases associated with menopause. If you're a healthy, non-obese, non-smoker, the risks of surgery may be very low, and the benefits of taking HRT may be very high. So here's the low risks of the surgery, and here are the benefits of the HRT. In that case, it would be more beneficial to have the surgery and take the HRT. But if you're a non-healthy, obese smoker, the risks of surgery may be high, and the benefits of taking HRT may be low. In that case, it may be better to skip the surgery and find other ways to compensate for the absence of estrogen. The majority of women notice improvement in their endometriosis with postmenopause, and the majority of women have no difficulty taking HRT. And there are no guidelines or mantras that constitute hard and fast rules on HRT with endometriosis. So a lot of this is going to boil down to what makes you and your doctor most comfortable. You will find doctors who absolutely won't give HRT to any woman with endometriosis. That's too restrictive. You need a doctor who will address your situation as unique. You need someone who will really spend time considering all your benefits and risks. If your doctor shuts the door on this outright, find another one who will help you weigh your options, or schedule a one-on-one consultation with me. I'll spend a bunch of time with you on this. I always say peace of mind is everything. Peace of mind comes from knowing that you've considered all your options, weighed them according to your value system, and chosen the right management for you. You deserve peace of mind. Do not settle for less. If you have severe endometriosis, it's less likely that your doctor will feel comfortable giving you HRT. That's not necessarily because HRT will cause harm. It may be because HRT can confuse the situation. Likewise, if you have an ovary that is enlarged with endometriosis called an endometrioma, your doctor is less likely to give you HRT. But in those instances, your best bet is to treat the endometriosis anyway. It's always confusing when you have one disease already and new things happen that are difficult to distinguish from the first disease. Doesn't that make sense? And don't forget that anytime you have something like severe endometriosis, it's easy for something even more severe to hide inside it. When that happens, you miss an early diagnosis of the more severe disease because you attribute all your problems to the endometriosis. You could have ovarian cancer hiding in an ovary that is full of endometriosis and miss it because of the endometriosis. But let's say that your doctor says you can take HRT with your endometriosis. What then? Do you remember the two different ways to take HRT? I taught you about the two different regimens for taking HRT in video 41. There's the cyclic regimen and there's the continuous regimen. So let's discuss each of those. The cyclic regimen mimics your cycles. So here's what your own hormones used to do when you were having your menstrual cycles. Estrogen rose in the first half of your cycle, and progesterone rose in the second half of your cycle. Wait a minute! That's precisely what caused your endometriosis to form in the first place. So a cyclic regimen that mimics this cycle this same pattern will also feed your endometriosis. A cyclic regimen involves taking estrogen all by itself in the early part of your cycle and then taking estrogen with progesterone later in the second half. And it produces the same changes in your uterine lining. This is the exact pattern. Estrogen alone, estrogen with progesterone, and then dropping of progesterone. That's the same pattern that created the endometriosis in the first place. And because a cyclic regimen mimics your cycles, you have a period. So you will still have periods on a cyclic regimen of HRT. And periods are what made it possible for endometriosis to develop. So if you use a cyclic regimen, you are likely to have continued development of your endometriosis. Or you may induce the endometriosis to build up and bleed even if you don't have your uterus anymore. And that brings us to the continuous regimen. A continuous regimen does not mimic your cycles. With a continuous regimen, you take both estrogen and progesterone every single day. Estrogen every day, progesterone every day. There's no up and down of hormones. It's just a flat line. And because you don't have periods, there's no opportunity to create new endometriosis. But you're still taking the two hormones that fed the endometriosis that already exists in the wrong location. So you might still support any existing endometriosis. Still, there's no doubt that the continuous regimen is preferred if you have endometriosis. So the summary is that endometriosis may or may not impair your ability to take HRT. It will depend on your particular circumstance, and it's your job to make sure you find a doctor who will really address your details. If you do take HRT, the continuous regimen is better than the cyclic regimen because it's less likely to aggravate your endometriosis. Okay, that's all, folks. Don't hesitate to go back and watch these 3 videos on endometriosis over again. You always learn more the second time around. I'm going to sign off for now, and I will see you in a week when we will begin our WHAM series. WHAM is an acronym that stands for What Happens at Menopause. W-H-A-M, what happens at menopause? I'll be grouping things like what dries up at menopause, what shrinks at menopause, what grows at menopause. You get the picture. There will be a bunch of videos like that. And for now, I'll bid you goodbye. In the meantime, between now and next week, please follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and subscribe to my channel, and schedule a one-on-one if you need one. Okay, see you soon. Bye.